we've touched on, I think, throughout, continuous improvements, and monitoring, but can you just get a bit, obviously, question asked about that? So I would love to hear any kind of innovative, approaches you're taking to continuously monitor or improve your program.
I think one thing that we have is connected for our employees to our travel and expense as well. And so behind the scenes, right, as employees are inputting their expenses, it's looking if there's anything fraudulent behind there, right? So if they list out the people that they may have entertained. We have it connected to certain controls that it would flag. And so that's something that's continuously monitoring all of our expenses as well. I think another experiment that we just did recently was we have a lot of quality claims, right, for the commodities that we ship. So looking at that, right, so when a third party is submitting quality claims, are these legitimate, right? Are there things that they are trying to list on there, maybe like a friendship payment, something like that, that would flag as more fraudulent? And so looking at that to see if, there are more effective ways to be looking into our claims.
Yeah. So we're doing something really similar in that space. So we've had 3 programs that we've launched over the last year that are attempting to get at certain data points. The first one is we have set up what we call a compliance bot that automatically pings the relationship owner in the business for that third party and says, how are things going? See anything on the ground you want to talk about? And just kind of checks in periodically. More frequently for higher risk third parties, less frequently for less risky third parties, but that gives us like a pulse check on the ground. And so that data has been really helpful. The other program very similarly is that transaction monitoring program. And so we're about to release it similarly in like the T&E space. We started with our PRs, our POs, and our invoices. We were effectively using like machine learning rule sets to kind of comb through that to start to learn about phrases and things. We started to feed it with ones that we knew were going to be higher risk. And it continues to kind of learn and hone that, and that's constantly running on all the invoices. And then the other thing that we launched recently is what we call like a post-intake review, which is a review of those intake forms that employees fill out, right? So part of I think an issue that everyone deals with is if you're reliant on employees to disclose elements of a third-party engagement, oftentimes they're not aware of a lot of the rationale behind why we ask some of these questions or the legalese behind some of this stuff. And as much as you try to make those questions really, really accessible to a lot of different people in the business, it can't always get there 100%, right? And so even with the best intended requesters, we sometimes will see that they like misunderstood a question or something. So despite putting like point in time training and hover overs in the intake that explain things, one of the things that we found has been really useful is to use all of those intakes to train some machine learning to say like, hey, usually people fill it out like this, and historically, if you're doing this kind of work, it's triggered this kind of review. But we noticed that like you did that, but you filled out this question differently, and it'll start to flag those anomalies. And that's been a really, really helpful thing to do because we can't possibly comb through when we're doing it at the engagement kind of scope of work level, like the tens of thousands of requests that come through. But this has enabled like us to have analysts that are just triaging the ones that look like they have some sort of data point that's just slightly off, that enables us to go back to the business and be like, hey, you mentioned that this third party is going to be helping us get permits, but you said that they weren't going to be interacting with the government. Is that really the case, right? And so that's been something that we've been relatively excited about. We're piloting it in the anti-corruption space specifically, but it is something that we want to bring across all the different risk verticals.
So a question I would like to kind of get to is on data, right? Obviously, with the importance of data and, as you say, good data in, good data out, or vice versa. What are you guys doing to ensure, that your data is a good data set, essentially, I guess?
So I'll talk generally about my experience in working with data, and I'll share just an example of my experience. So data integrity, I think it's been a theme in other panelists that have been talking about data earlier on the conference. So from a data integrity perspective, I do caution folks as it relates to moving forward with doing like data analytics and leveraging those data analytics, because making sure that your data set is clean and is well maintained. One of the experiences that I've had in my previous years is working with an organization where they were trying to leverage their SAP data set. And they had about 20,000 plus third-party vendors or third parties within their SAP system. This included customers, this included vendors. They went through a cleansing process and were able to knock that down to 7,000. And a large chunk of that was because of duplicates, third parties that they hadn't been done business with in like 20 plus years, and so on and so forth. So they were able to clean all of that information out. Now, once they completed that project, which was great, I gave them hands down, fantastic. The maintaining part was the key, right? Because 3 months later, they went from 7,000 all the way back up to 15,000 third parties in their system, and basically had to do another rehash of this cleansing process. So it's just, I do caution, it is great to leverage data analytics, but really make sure that you maintain the integrity of your data when you go through that process, because you will have to do that cleanse on the initial forefront.
Last question. Given the topic of the session, about, the new dawn of third-party risk, and human rights coming into the mix and the fold of things, and obviously each company is on a different stage of its third-party compliance program. So can each of you just give a quick, sentence or two on what does good look like for you moving forward for your program?
For us, obviously, it's clearly collaboration, communication, and that overarching umbrella that we're trying to get to, which is making sure that we've got one program in place where all the various functions are constantly communicated and working with each other.
I think for us, it's continued coordination between the risk management and what I think of as like the operational side of the house with third-party oversight and management. It's reduced tooling, it's more efficient processes, it's getting down to a single survey, amongst other things. I think our biggest push now, though, is moving to a place where we are built into the strategy of the company. So outside of just looking at individual scopes of work with third parties, it's looking and talking to the business about, okay, so-and-so, you want to monetize in this new way. That's awesome. Let's talk about how you leverage third parties in that monetization effort. And what do those third parties look like? And what types of third parties are you using? And what risks do those bring holistically? And what's that leverage model? And so as they're crafting these new areas of business that we're going into, they're doing it with a strategic mindset about how third parties fit into that. Not just from like a compliance perspective, but from like a business catapulting perspective, right? Because if you use them properly, it can actually further what you're trying to do, but you have to be aware of the risks that are there. And so that's kind of the next area that we'd like to move into.
Yeah, I think kind of to go along with that, right? The business is ever changing. And so maybe some of the things that we're utilizing today are not going to be effective in a few years. And so, that might be like new regulations or everything with geopolitical issues. And so just making sure that we're constantly assessing the tools and being innovative with what we're using to make sure it is effective in capturing our risks.